All right. I am here with Laurie Wevers, and we have, Laurie is a religious trauma therapist,
and spiritual director, and
all kinds of interesting, almost seemingly contradictory things, especially for those of us who've been really hurt by churches. And I'm just so thankful that you are here with me today.
I'm thankful to be here. Yeah.
Laurie and I met, there was a showing of the film 1946, and you were standing outside. Like, tell me how how does that happen?
Yeah. Well, it's actually funny. My chosen parents told me about the film that they had seen 1946, I don't know, months ago. And then I had a client bring up that they were showing the film for the World Pride Film Festival. So I was like, oh, all of these people who may have religious trauma might also come and see this film.
Right. And be triggered by
this film, potentially.
Right.
And so I just messaged the people in charge and was like, hey, can I come hand out little packages of Kleenex and my card at the entrance of the
Both
film?
Of which were really helpful.
Yes. I know, for me too.
Yeah.
So just to offer support to people, because when I started doing religious trauma, it was an overlooked piece in psychology. Now it's much more recognized. I'm a part of, listservs of religious trauma therapists all over the world.
Right.
So.
Yeah, and I remember the first time I encountered the term religious trauma. Like, as soon as I heard it, I was like, oh, that's the thing. And then I found the Religious Trauma Institute, I think is what it's called.
Okay. Yep.
Which they have some training for professionals, but also some introductory thing for people who are not going to be doing therapy.
Yeah.
Which I don't. I'm a pastor. I actually have a half of a master's in what would have been an LPC, but it was I realized that was not the path, but I still do not practice any sort of therapy because I'm not qualified. Also, if you ever have a pastor that tries to give you marriage therapy or any sort of
preach,
get up and walk out the door, or if you're still too bad, just ignore what they say.
Yes.
And then don't call them back.
Yes, especially if they tell you just to pray about your trauma.
Oh my God.
Yes.
No. Okay, so let's talk for a second, because when I say religious trauma, it is, like you said, it was something that was ignored by psychology for a long time.
Yeah.
Maybe not. I don't know. Ignored may be strong, but when I say it in a podcast or in a video that I do on social media, there's always a significant number of people, and I would say that it's people across the ideological spectrum, probably more conservatives than progressive people, but that aren't sure if it's real, and I would say probably don't even know what it is.
Yeah.
So I'd love to sort of get your 30,000 foot view of it, and then dive into your understanding of it specifically.
Yeah.
So what is religious trauma?
What is religious trauma? Well, for those of us who have religious trauma and know it, in a lot of ways we don't need a definition because we feel it, we experience it, those types of things. But I will give you more of a clinical definition, and I apologize for reading some things, but I want people to get the real
Reading
stuff.
the thing helps me realize you're not just bullshit.
That's right. That's right. And some of what I'm reading comes from Dr. Laura Anderson's book, When Religion Hurts You.
Okay.
So first of all,
is that something that you would recommend non-professionals reading?
Yes,
Okay.
totally recommend. So first of all, what is trauma? It's not what happened to you, but your body and nervous system's response to what happened to you.
Yeah.
So when I said those of us who have religious trauma, we know it's in our body's system, our nervous system.
What do you?
Yeah.
What do you mean? Well, finish your definition. Then I'm gonna go and try to help unpack that.
Okay. So anything that's too much, too soon, or too fast, and that undermines our normal ability to cope and return to a sense of safety. So for example, there's big T trauma, like murder, rape, witnessing. Can I not say that word?
Yeah, it's just TikTok is looking for that, and
okay.
You know it's weird. I'm sorry. It's that one, anything that's like that, we have to sort of circumvent, come around it, just because we live and die by the TikTok algorithmic bots.
Okay. So pretend I didn't say that.
It's totally fine. It's totally fine. It's just so weird. So there's like the big T trauma, which is things that are like violating your agency, violating you in all sorts of like intimate ways and physical ways.
Yep. And then there are small T traumas, which could be anything for people based on their personality and situations. So something I like to say is like, in 4th grade, someone said something nasty to you on the bus. Okay. And maybe they said you're fat or something like that. And then you're in your 40s and 50s and still believing that people think you're fat from that. That's a small T trauma. Yeah. Right? Those types of things. It lives in your mind. It's not debilitating your everyday functioning, those types of things. So trauma is perceptive. There does not need to be an actual threat or danger in front of you. Trauma is also embodied, stored in the body and not in the mind. We cannot merely think trauma away. And this comes into play with purity culture trauma in the body that I would say a huge majority of the clients that I see, women that I see who grew up in purity culture, now have to see some sort of pelvic floor PT, that sort of constriction in the body and needing even physical medical attention. Okay.
Well, you're bringing that back up. So you said it's like lives in the body.
Yep.
What does that mean? Because, one of the things as I was listening to you talk, I realized that the other group of people that, when I say religious trauma, that don't understand it, are people who are experiencing it. But because of some of the other people that say it's not real or whatever, they don't, it's almost like the permission to identify that as something they're struggling with has been taken away, partially because they don't know it, they haven't heard somebody explain it. This is what it is. So when you say it lives in the body, what does that mean?
Yeah. So the one example I already gave was the purity culture piece and how that training lives in the body. Right. A lot of pieces of religious trauma that I see people hold in the body is especially queer people who have been told that they're an abomination or that for sure they're going to hell. Even if we've done a lot of work on that theology and working through that.
Like cognitively.
Many of them struggle with sleep, nightmares, worrying about going to hell. Right. That anxiety is high, and lives in them as a constant fear. They can't just think away because we've done a lot of the cognitive work. Right. So oftentimes I have to implement a trauma therapy, generally one that's called EMDR. Okay. That works which is magic.
It's hard and magic.
Yes, and can seem a little wonky to people because it has to do with eye movements, but it also involves our somatic responses to trauma.
And somatic means?
Somatic means embodied.
Yes.
Yeah, so trauma in the body, and that's sort of where I can see some relief for people is getting that trauma out of the body.
Right. I I normally don't share a lot of my personal story, but I'll say this. I had a therapist at one point when I was talking with them about something ask me where I was feeling.
Yep.
Right? And like, and it was when they first said that, I was like, what do you mean?
Uh-huh.
Like, is that something that you ask?
Absolutely.
When you ask that, what are you meaning? Like, what are you asking me to do to respond?
Yeah. So I'll throw the question back at you too, is did you have an answer pretty quickly? Maybe you hadn't thought of it before, but
Right.
did you have an answer of where it was?
It took me a minute to understand what she was asking.
Got it. So that's what you're asking me too, is like, why do we ask that? Or
Yeah,
what
and like,
are we
what
looking
do you
for?
mean? Like, do
Yeah.
I feel like a physical pain? Like,
Yeah.
it took me a second to answer what he was asking me. Yeah. So, what does that mean?
Yeah. So
Because it sounds, I was in California,
so you thought it was a little woo-woo?
which is fine. I am a little woo-woo. I'm very
I'm a
woo-woo.
little woo-woo too.
I'm very woo-woo, but it was one of those things I was like, what's the California therapy
Yeah,
question?
no, that's a good trauma question because we know that trauma doesn't live only in the mind.
Yeah.
You know, we think about mental health only being here and then being cut off from the rest of our
Right.
body.
Yeah.
Which,
So what are you
yeah.
asking somebody to do when you ask them that question?
Yeah, like when you think about that trauma, where does it show up in your body? So it's in your head when you think
Right.
about it. Is it also somewhere else?
So what might somebody say?
Yeah. Really common chest, throat, stomach.
And what feeling?
Emotion, you mean?
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah,
So,
I mean, like when you
fear-
say where do you feel it in your body? Are you talking about physical? Are you
Right,
talking about,
right, yes. Thank you. So EMDR usually asks for a sensation and an emotion. So do you feel tension in your chest? Do you feel tingling in your arms? Do you feel, I don't know, a headache all of a sudden come on? Those types of things.
Right.
So that somatic
Yeah.
feeling, sensation, and then also like what emotions also come up with that trauma.
Right. One of the things that I think is interesting, you brought up EMDR,
Mm-hmm.
which is fascinating, and when you hear it, it doesn't make sense.
Mhm.
So, I'll just talk in normal, non-trained people terms. Like, you will have somebody, like, let me see if I can get it to where people will see it on both lives.
And they can maybe
Right,
see it.
where they will, like, you will have somebody take their fingers or some sort of thing on a stick, and they'll move it back and forth, and you will track it, right?
Some people just
or a
left the
light
live
bar,
stream
that,
right
like,
now. Yeah.
a light bar like Kit from Knight Rider,
Mhm.
with a light going.
Yes.
That stuff is not helpful. Sometimes a buzzing in
Yes.
one of your hands, but that's doing something in the brain. What's
Mhm.
happening in the brain when they're doing
Yeah.
that?
Okay. So here's my EMDR spiel. Okay.
Okay.
So first of all, EMDR stands for eye movement, desensitization, and reprocessing. So my spiel is that you have memory of like what you ate for breakfast this morning.
Right.
And you're not super thinking about it all day long, like what you ate for breakfast. It just goes from the emotion side of your brain to the thinking side of your brain and into your memory bank. You're not
Right.
super conscious of it. Something like a big T trauma or a little T trauma
Mhm.
gets stuck in the emotion side of the brain.
Okay.
So let's say you were in a car crash or someone rear ends you. So every time you pull up to a stoplight now, you kind of cringe and like brace for impact.
Yeah.
Because anything coming close to the
Mhm.
trauma that actually happened brings up a reaction in the body.
Right.
And so what EMDR does is help move that stuck memory from the emotion side of the brain into the thinking side of the brain and into the memory bank
Uh-huh.
through eye movements.
And so, I know that this is an oversimplification, but the emotion side of the brain that's the left. It's in the left lobe, kind of, and then or whatever, and then one is on the other side.
Yeah.
And literally, you are activating both sides.
Yeah.
As you're processing the trauma.
Yeah.
Right? Is that right?
It has to do with bilateral stimulation,
Right.
and that meaning we have a meridian line that runs through sort of the center of our body, and one side being the cognitive and one side being the creative. And so EMDR helps cross the meridian lines in the brain, and that is what helps move it through to the thinking side of the brain and into the memory bank.
And I know so many people that when their therapist, psychologist, whatever, suggested EMDR, they thought they were crazy.
Mm-hmm.
And then they come out, the sessions are hard, but they come out on the other side of this, like, I can't believe how much healing was accomplished by thinking about my trauma and moving my eyes at the same time.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's wild.
Yeah, it's amazing. And I also use a newer trauma therapy, also called internal family systems, that folks probably have heard of. It's newer training, but within the scope of religious trauma, it's like, just like you have a family on the outside, or your chosen family, or whatever it is, of people, you have these individual parts of you inside of you that you've gotten along the way that have protected you or kept you safe or kept your life going or whatever. So one could be a really religious part that keeps telling you that you're going to hell. You could have a really progressive part that's done their work and, figured out some new theology or has gone to some therapy, those types of things, and sometimes they're in conflict.
Right.
And so getting to know those parts too, which probably for some people, all of this is sounding cuckoo bananas, but
yes, listen, but trauma is really weird.
Yeah.
I have a really good friend that I know very well, that their trauma was so significant that it caused dissociative amnesia, where they literally didn't remember it until they were decades later.
Yeah.
And it's like a movie. It almost feels like that's not possible, but it's what happened in their brain to protect them.
Yeah.
And trauma's just, it's so, I don't know, it's just a weird thing, I feel like. And it's something that we don't talk about in the same way we talk about depression or anxiety. We talk about those things all the time, but not trauma.
Right. Right.
So you said it's located in the body. It doesn't require like an immediate danger.
Correct.
Right. It doesn't require an immediate danger. What are some of the other aspects of trauma?
Of trauma, or do you want me to move into religious trauma?
Oh yeah, well let's talk about religious trauma. So there's all of that, and then you add religion.
Yeah. So, religion itself is not trauma.
Okay, that's good, right?
Mm-hmm.
That's really important.
Yep. I mean, you might have some people comment that may beg to differ depending on lots of different pieces, but
right. No, I will, and that's okay.
Yes.
Okay, but it is important to understand, at least from a clinical perspective, religion itself is not necessarily traumatic.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. So I will talk about both religious trauma, religious trauma as complex trauma, and religious abuse, because all of them sort of swim in the same stream.
Okay.
And are helpful for people to know, especially people who might be skeptical about is religious trauma a thing.
Right.
So religious trauma is trauma. It's the trauma that results from a single or multiple experience that happened in a religious system or within relationships.
Right.
So I like to jump into religious trauma as complex trauma because I think a lot of us who have religious trauma have complex trauma.
Okay. What is complex trauma?
Yeah. So complex trauma is not just one specific overwhelming incident,
Uh-huh.
but an entire life defined by something traumatic. So it could be religious teachings that weren't just at a place of worship, but were also in the home, which for many of us, for me, I grew up really fundamentalist religious, like it absolutely translated to in the home. And because it was in the home, then the trauma and dysfunction in my home was also part of religious trauma. It was sort of like trauma and religious practice and those types of things.
Right.
So many of us can experience this as like not being able to escape as a child because it was just part of family life.
Right.
So our parents, our caregivers were promoting these messages both in public and in private. And the complex piece that really gets tricky for people when it comes to maybe attachment in other relationships later in life or post-deconstruction or those types of things. Many caregivers and people who loved me were also the people who enforced these rules and punishments for not abiding by the religious teachings. You know, for me, my dad always threatened that we'd get it when we got home if we didn't go up for the children's sermon. You know, if we weren't perfect at church, there were in all of our bedrooms like a block of wood again at the top of each door. Be like, you'd get stick if you didn't go up for the children's sermon.
And that was, you would hit with it.
Get spanked, yeah, with it. And, you know, I remember my brother after church, because he didn't go up for the children's sermon, coming home quickly after Sunday school and shoving his dresser in front of his door, you know.
Yeah. That's hard.
Exactly.
It's hard for you when it happens to you, but it's also secondarily hard when you see it from your brother.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah, because I also have to hear it when it happens too.
Right.
You know. So yeah, this part of the very people who are supposed to be a source of safety and stability are also a source of terror and confusion.
Yeah.
So some people have this with their ministers that are supposed to be like who you learn from and lead and those types of things. And then maybe there's something that happens in private that's abusive. I'm trying not to use trigger words.
Well, intimate encounters, right? Where they do things that violate people's agency.
That's right.
Yeah.
Yeah. And then for a lot of us, it paralleled our home lives.
Yeah.
Something I see in tandem a lot is kids who, or adult children of narcissistic parents or of emotionally immature parents. So there was a lot of like narcissism paired with religious trauma. So that tells you like you don't get a voice, you don't get to figure out who you are, you become who that person wants you to be or else.
Right.
Right? Right. So that really disrupts a lot of normal development in so many ways.
Wow. Yeah. And you know, as I'm hearing that, you're talking about beliefs, you know, things that you were taught, I should say, that you internalize.
Mm-hmm.
So, like one of the things that I talk to people about, especially from fundamentalist evangelical streams of Christianity, is a lot of times, and they don't realize it, like we choose our beliefs, all of them, but sometimes the way that we've chosen is that we've given that choice over to somebody else, either actively or passively.
Yeah.
And so a lot of people have what I call inherited beliefs.
Yeah, absolutely.
Right? And they don't even realize it. They're deeply held, sometimes fundamental orientations to the world, right? Not even just to God.
Yep.
like I can't question a person in authority, right?
Yep.
It's just these deep things that come out of these religious streams.
Yeah.
And I feel like, and maybe you can tell me, it feels sometimes when I listen to their stories that some of those deeply held inherited beliefs end up causing, indirectly, causing more trauma because of how they teach them to act in the world.
Yeah.
Am I off base with that?
Not off base. I mean, I think what you're talking about is taking people's agency to decide for themselves.
Yeah.
And, oftentimes I'm sure many of us have experienced sort of the threat of following Jesus. Like, you better follow Jesus rather than I willingly follow these beliefs because of love. It's what I'm naturally coming to, but like fire insurance, right? As we've all probably heard.
Yeah.
So.
Fire insurance is the concept that you believe this so that you don't burn forever.
That's right.
In hell.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay, so that's this one domain of religious trauma. There's others.
Yeah. Yep. So I will say, so religious abuse is abuse, but what is abuse? So abuse is just the improper use or treatment of something or someone. So what's improper?
And it's important because that's a therapeutic. That's a therapeutic definition for abuse, which a lot of times people have a legal definition for abuse. When they're using that term, they're thinking like, what would you get arrested for?
Sure.
But when therapists use it, it's more nuanced. Can you give us explain that distinction between like legal abuse and like what is it really that you're talking about? Because you kind of gave this definition. What is abuse in the therapeutic sense?
Yeah. So I use the word the improper use of something or someone. So it could be the improper use of religious beliefs or teachings or doctrines or relationships against another person. So there's a proper way to interact with others. And much of what is proper and improper is culturally defined.
Right.
So an easy one could be like abusive or non-abusive, but again, what is abuse?
Right.
But this emphasis on the cultural definition of proper and improper being abusive or non-abusive has protected religion from scrutiny for centuries.
And why is that?
Because they can be like, well, it's improper for women to pass the offering plate on Sundays.
Right.
So improper. Right? Rather than just calling that patriarchy.
Right, yeah.
Or calling that bad theology, or
Or in purity culture, this idea that, that women need to dress modestly because they might cause a man to become aroused.
Yeah.
However, the underlying thing is that I'm responsible for their thoughts.
Yeah.
Right? So that's an improper, and we not me anymore, unfortunately. I wish I could say never, but we support that with the Bible and with religious beliefs.
Yep. And we call that spiritual bypassing.
Oh, I love this term.
Yes.
Okay,
so
tell me spiritual bypassing.
Yes, using spirituality to bypass underlying abuse, trauma, or patriarchy, or those types of things. For example, when I was confronting my parents on the harm that was caused in our family, and telling them that they needed to admit to that so our family could heal and get some help so we don't keep causing harm. And their immediate response was, we will not do what you say, we will fix it with God. That is a spiritual bypass of not wanting to do inner work. Not wanting to take responsibility themselves themselves for harm, but easily slap a Christian phrase on there,
Right.
and they feel like they're following God.
Right. And so in the case of purity culture, tell me if I'm understanding this concept correctly. That in the case of saying like women need to dress modestly because they might cause a man to be aroused, that is bypassing the men's job of owning their own thoughts and their own emotions and their own reactions, and generally how they act on those, I think, is mostly. But just bypassing that.
Yep.
And this also inflicting all of this like perception problem on women.
That's right. Gaslighting.
Yeah.
For sure. Spiritual bypassing and gaslighting. So there's especially women in marginalized community within religions are the ones who carry the brunt, right?
Yeah.
It's the way, oftentimes white men who are the ones not taking responsibility and having other people take the responsibility for their actions.
Yeah. Wow. Are there other domains that we haven't touched on? Okay, so now.
Yeah.
Okay, with that sort of basic understanding of religious trauma, there's big T, which is the things that when we say trauma, we often physical violence, intimate violence, those kinds of things. And then there's little t trauma, which in the religious sense could be, I don't know, take every thought captive to Christ.
Right.
Right. That you should be able to micromanage all of your thoughts.
Right.
And that might be a small t trauma.
Yeah.
And all of that. So what links all that together? So like what? I guess at the meta level, what is the trauma? Like what's trauma? Like how do you say like I don't know, any of those things are traumatic? So you link this action with this diagnosis.
Right. It has to do with how the nervous system is responding. Yeah, if I have someone like who can't talk through an experience they had taking the Eucharist, and they have panic attacks when they're talking about it. Someone could say like, they're not traumatized by that. You're like, well, your body's showing me that something is happening here, and that something was not okay and is still not okay with your system about what happened. So I get plenty of people who will be like, is this even real? Like you said, they might have memories that surface. They'll be like, how do I know this really happened, or this was my mind? And a lot of times as therapists, like we can't know 100%, especially we weren't there there in their childhood, but we're there with the response that's happening now. Right. So some part of you was not okay with what happened.
Okay, so sort of taking all of that, if somebody is trying to figure out, do I have this? And I mean, outside of going to a therapist, we'll get to that next. What would you say to them to answer that question, that initial self-diagnosis of like, maybe I do need to talk to somebody about this? Like what work, what questions could they do on their own to say, to get to a place where they say, I might actually have it?
Yeah. Well, first of all, I would say read.
Okay.
If you have access to a library or something like that, the book that I mentioned before, When Religion Hurts You. Also, Dr. Hilary McBride has a new book out called Holy Hurt.
Okay.
Start reading some books about religious trauma and see if you find yourself within those narratives.
Right.
Now there's a psychologist, I believe she's a psychologist, or maybe she's just master's level, I can't remember, Marlene Winnell. She wrote a book called Leaving the Fold.
Okay.
And she talks about religious trauma syndrome.
Okay.
So I can just say what she's saying.
Right.
She is a doctor. Okay.
Yeah.
Religious trauma syndrome is the condition experienced by people who are struggling with leaving an authoritarian, dogmatic religion and coping with the damage of indoctrination. They may be going through the shattering of a personally meaningful faith and or breaking away from a controlling community and lifestyle. Religious trauma syndrome is a function of both the chronic abuses of harmful religion and the impact of severing one's connection with one's faith.
Yeah.
It can be compared to a combination of PTSD and complex PTSD.
Okay. So, if they aren't readers, what
Podcasts,
questions?
your
they-
podcast.
Right, yeah. But what questions could they ask? Just that sort of
themselves.
initial, like,
Yeah.
I'm just trying to say, like, okay, do I need to call somebody? Like,
Mhm.
what questions are there? What would you say? Like, what would they ask?
I think a good question is, do my faith beliefs also come with shame?
Okay.
Do I also feel shame or fear
Yeah.
from the teachings of my religion?
Right.
Do I have the ability to express my opinion and have it held?
Mm-hmm.
Or do I have to follow a set of beliefs to be in?
Yeah. And maybe is there something somatically, like when they, even if they aren't involved in religion anymore,
Mhm.
what kind of questions might they ask? What
Yeah.
reflect on it that way?
Yeah, so maybe noticing if you ever have a tight chest or tension in your throat, or noticing yourself starting to panic about something, asking yourself, what just happened right now that
Yeah.
started this? Was I having a thought about something?
Right.
Like for some religiously traumatized people, it can even be like they had a moment of sexual arousal and immediately feel panic
Yeah.
or shame in those moments.
Yeah.
Those are some indications. Your sexuality should not feel like shame.
Yeah. Okay, so how do you find therapists that can help you with religious trauma specifically? Like, what are you looking for?
Yeah. I mean, it's really, obviously I'm biased because I am a religious trauma therapist
Right.
who's experienced religious trauma
Mhm.
herself. And I feel like therapists who haven't experienced it themselves miss a whole lot of things. So there's a place called the reclamationcollective.com, and they do a lot of therapeutic, they can't call themselves therapists because
Right.
they go across state lines and
Uh-huh.
those types of
Right.
things. They offer a lot of religious trauma groups, and there's also a therapist directory for religious trauma therapists.
And where is that?
reclamationcollective.com.
Okay, great.
So there's some good information on there, and always with a therapist, like just because someone's a therapist doesn't always mean that they're safe, unfortunately.
Right.
So also as you know, like consult with a few of them,
Mhm.
get on the phone with them. How does your body react to being
Yeah.
in conversation with this person?
Yeah.
Do any of them make religious comments that make you feel uncomfortable?
Right.
Take note of that,
Yeah.
because you don't need to be feeling those things. You should not be feeling those things
Yeah.
from your therapist.
Right.
So there's plenty of different genres of religious trauma too. If you grew up Jehovah's Witness or Mormon or Christian, we're all out there
Yeah.
doing that. And if you can't find someone in your area on Reclamation Collective, you can always reach out to me. I'm really connected with religious trauma therapists everywhere. So.
And how would they reach out to you?
So my Instagram is Willow Tree Wisdom and Psych.
Okay.
They could also.
.com?
That's just my Instagram
Okay.
handle.
Oh, Instagram.
Yep.
Sorry.
Instagram handle is Willow Tree Wisdom and Psych. And if you want to email me, my email address is Laurie, Laurie, at LaurieWeversLLC.com. And then I'll have you like put in my website too. I don't have it memorized.
No, that's totally fine. Okay, so thank you so much. Oh, that was so helpful. Yeah, I really appreciate you being here.
Yeah, thank you.
Now, we have a couple of minutes left before we have to go to our next thing. So, if you are watching live and you have a question about religious trauma, Laurie Weaver is Laurie Weavers.
Everyone
I'm sorry.
does it.
Yes, Laurie Weavers is a religious trauma therapist, and she's here with us. And so, go ahead and you can put those in the chat on Instagram or on YouTube or on TikTok, and we'll do our best to answer them. It takes a minute. There's like a delay between what we do here and when it goes out to the interwebs and to their phones. So we'll wait for just a second to see if we get any Q&A. We do know that we are doing this at 10 o'clock in the morning, Eastern
We really
time.
know that. We
That's,
feel it.
You
we
are
feel
not
it.
wrong. Yes. So if you've got any questions for Laurie or about religious trauma in general, go ahead and put those in the chat. I'll ask you a question.
Mm-hmm.
If somebody is talking to a family, a parent comes to me or to you and says, my kid came out to me. I don't believe, I believe that they might go to hell, but I don't want to mess them up. What do I do? What are a couple of things that that we could say? Well, I am not qualified, but there was this religious trauma therapist that that I saw on TikTok, and they said you could do a couple of things. So obviously, I wish they would just jettison that belief, but that's not simple for a lot of people. So what do you tell that person to do?
Yeah. Well, that is personal to me also, and tricky, as I also came out to fundamentalist family members. What I would say to those parents is, it's not about you in the moment. It's about your kiddo who came to you with something really vulnerable, and they came to you at least with a little bit of trust in the relationship. And so what you say next really matters. Really matters if they will continue to feel safe with you or not. And so prioritizing your connection with them, whether or not you agree with them or not, you could say, thank you for sharing that with me, even though you know I might believe differently. And I would say a lot of parents just aren't curious. They, again, to use the term, they spiritually bypass and say, like, because I'm a Christian, I can't support you, you know, instead of, hey, my kid grew up in Christianity and they're gay. What has their journey been like? Like, maybe being curious about their journey without preaching to them what you think. And then for any parent out there, make sure you've done your work on any conflict resolution skills, because that's a big barrier for so many, is like conversations just get shut down because there isn't a healthy flow of conflict resolution. So
I also had somebody tell me that it can be helpful to ask, to tell parents to like look for the things in your kid's life that you can encourage, that you can support, and just like actively like try to find something every day or every week that you can say, I'm so proud of you.
That's beautiful. Yeah.
To there, I thought was that it would help them shift their perception away from the like whatever negative thing that they believe about their sexuality, and make sure that they continue to see them in a positive light and not have that dimmer
Yeah,
light.
exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly. I think exactly what you said is wonderful. Like, they're still your kid.
Right.
What do you love about them?
Yeah.
Like, you know, their sexuality is definitely like a huge part of them, and it makes up who they are, and you love who they are.
Yeah.
So let them know that.
Okay, I've got a couple of questions
Okay.
right here from Instagram. One is, what are your tips / advice to overcome religious trauma if a person is still involved in a non-affirming Christian church?
Yeah. Yeah.
And I'm assuming a queer person isn't still involved in it.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
Because
So-
I know that I'll give you a story and an
Yeah.
example to maybe help frame it from my community. There are people who live in very rural areas where the whole
Mhm.
community, all their social connections are tied into a church, and to leave that church wouldn't just mean to leave a tradition, it would mean to leave all of their connections. And so
Right.
their continued involvement in that church really is key to their whole social world.
Yeah.
It's like, what do you, what advice to deal with religious trauma when you have to continue being in this
Yeah.
church?
Well, a couple of things. I'm wondering if you could do a both and sort of
Uh-huh.
scenario. Can you be part of a religious trauma group online
Right.
somewhere while you still continue to be in relationship with your community? Obviously, I'm going to recommend if you're experiencing harm
Uh-huh.
from a place or a person, that's a different story.
Right.
And seeking help from a therapist on how to sort of get out of something like that
Right.
is a good idea. But
And
yeah.
what if you are a kid in a closet? And so but again, similar set of circumstances.
Yeah.
I feel like they might not be able to like tell mom and dad, I want to see a therapist.
Yeah.
What about them?
Yeah. Well, first of all, little queer friend in the closet, we love you.
Right?
We love you.
Yes.
And
God loves you.
And God loves you, and we don't believe you're an abomination or going to hell. So
Right.
you've got people who firmly believe that.
Yeah.
Every kid has access to the internet now. Q Christian is also a good place to go.
The letter Q.
The letter Q Christian. .com, .org. I can't remember.
If you Google the letter Q Christian, it'll come up.
Yeah, there's lots of things that you can read. Theological pieces, should you feel like, a lot of people feel like they need to have rhetoric around why they are who they are, or those types of things. But also support is key. Like, you have to be able to know or follow on Instagram or TikTok
Yeah.
people who are supportive for you. That you may not have a lot of choices, unfortunately, until
Right.
you graduate. But again, kid in the closet, we love you, and there are so many people out there wanting to support you.
And we call that, like, finding people online, parasocial relationship. Like, for me, people might not be able to have an actual social relationship with me, but in the absence of an actual social relationship, finding people online that you can sort of experience that almost relationship
Yeah.
and feel supported, because you know that person would support you.
Yep.
That person. Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, there's another question from Instagram. Do you do any somatic work with religious trauma clients?
So I
And define it for people who don't know, what is somatic work?
Yeah, just trauma that's lodged in the body, where you're
Right.
having a lot of sensations of trauma. Like I said previously, EMDR is sort of my tool to sort of somatically connect with that. There's a type of therapy called somatic experiencing that really works a lot more with body movements and those types of things. A yoga practice can be really interesting for people, noticing what comes up in different poses and just questioning some of that. But for me personally, how I work with the somatic piece is through EMDR and internal family systems.
And the EMDR is the moving your eyes back and forth, but it's not something really, you need to know what you're doing
Yeah.
to really utilize that. Right?
Yeah. I mean, something helpful for me working through my own like purity culture, body freeze kind of things was joining like what's considered more of like an ecstatic dance group that was all women and is pretty much just like a friend brings a playlist and we just all move our bodies freely in ways that however we want to, which can help with some of that freezing.
Yeah, absolutely. If you are watching live, you can post your questions. Laurie Wevers is a religious trauma therapist, and she is graciously giving us a free session to ask our questions about religious trauma, understanding religious trauma, and whatever. So if you've got questions, you can put them in the chat. We're live on TikTok and Instagram and YouTube. So if you see me clicking my little
tablet thing,
pad thing, touchpad, that's me flipping between the different chats. Because I'm sure there's some product that unifies it. I just don't have time to find it.
Yeah.
And ChatGPT didn't indicate it when I asked it the question.
Yeah.
Okay.
Can I add something?
Oh, go ahead.
Before we jump into another one, because sometimes something that comes up a lot is the traumatization of the image of God.
Oh yeah.
That comes up for people. And that's where spiritual direction comes in for me for people who want it. And I want to say that.
And you are also a spiritual director.
I'm also a spiritual
director.
director.
Which is not just like a random term. It's training. It's a thing that you do. So.
Yes. Yeah. So yeah, I have a certification in spiritual direction, and a spiritual director, my very first spiritual director, who is now my chosen mom, really like saved my spirituality. And what I mean by that is that it was a space that I could shake my fist at the sky and say all the things that you're not allowed to say in church, and ask my questions. And I was an atheist for a while, and my spiritual director was with me during that time.
Yeah.
So really someone to journey with you as you decide how you may want to connect with the more of the universe, and we can call that so many different things.
Right.
The God word can be triggering for a lot of people. And so, so I just want to know there are ways that I help people sort of work through the traumatic image of God to get to a place where spirituality can feel shameless.
Yeah, absolutely. Okay, another question. This one is from the Instagram chat. Is there hope a religious homophobic parent can change and become loving and lose their hate?
Oh, my friend. I feel the tears in my own eyes well up with that, because I'm right there with you. I'm right there with you. I'm estranged from my family. I could be with them if I was okay with their pieces of, I would need a chaperone around the children, and I would have to hide who I am. So I am with you. Is there hope? I am holding hope with you as someone who believes deeply in the transformation of people, and and when I think my own parents probably have their own religious trauma and they're not aware of it. And so they're encompassed in a lot of shame and fear themselves that they can't see reality.
Yeah.
And so I can still hold hope that maybe something breaks through to them. And I wish I could give you 100%. And I just want you to know I feel that ache right there with you. Right there with you.
And I can say, from my experience, I've seen parents change.
Right.
I've seen them change later, and then I've seen them not get all the way there, but have movement.
Yeah, that I can agree to. Yeah.
And I in the store, like I literally got a DM from somebody, you know, a little while ago. It was a parent. They were saying, I love my kid. I want to not believe this, right? But I've been told this is the only thing. Can you help me understand? And so my experience is that movement generally comes from loving their kid.
Agreed.
Not that people who don't believe they don't love their kids. I don't necessarily. I don't know what I think about that, but that's been my experience, and I can't tell you how common that is.
Yeah.
I just know that I've seen it, and it's wonderful. There's hope, but I don't want to give people a false hope.
Yeah.
Right.
Exactly.
Okay. Another question from Instagram. What do I say to a pushy pastor who says I'm going to hell if I don't accept Jesus?
You can say, I don't believe I'm going to hell.
Right.
I believe God loves me. And I believe that's what you believe.
Right.
For me, but I don't believe the same about me.
Yeah. And I'd say a pushy pastor, my response
Please.
would be, I need you to not push this on me.
Exactly that.
I'm not ready for that.
Yep.
And if you keep pushing, I'm gonna shut down.
Yeah.
If you think that's what I need, then I can tell you the only way I'm gonna get there is if you stop. Now that is I guess, semi-emotionally intelligent way of communicating with someone who might not have the level of emotional intelligence to receive that
Yep.
and respond appropriately.
Yep.
And I would then say, if they keep pushing, if it is possible, and it's not always possible, find somewhere else.
Exactly.
There are pastors who
Yes.
won't be that way.
Yes. Yep.
So we've got a couple of other comments. I'm a counselor. I have deconstructed from religion but long for the community of church. I'm going to say something here. You obviously are in a similar place as them. We have this thing called not church. And it is, the reason we call it not church is because somebody said it's like church. People talk about spiritual things. When things are hard, they're there for each other. We post memes. We talk about politics, whatever. But there's no judgment. Nobody's going to tell you you're going to hell if you've got a tarot card deck, if you go into the woods and you draw a circle on the ground, or if you go to church, right?
Mm-hmm.
There's no judgment. And so it's like church. It's like what they wanted, but it's not. So it's on Discord. And we have people who identify religiously. If you think of the most weird fringe religious identification we have, we've got one. We might have multiple. We definitely have one.
Right.
Like, there was one outstanding, and then the other day somebody joined and said, I am this, and I was like, okay, we've got that now. And I can tell you, in this world, it is an unusual space in that somebody will say, I don't know, I mean, like any outlandish, over the top, or even normal thing that another person will disagree with, because I know where those people are coming from, but they don't challenge them.
Yeah.
Their response is always like, wow, that's interesting. I've never, or like, can you tell me how that feels, or how did you get to this conclusion, or whatever?
Yes.
And it is so helpful for people, for our community, because they feel like, one of them said, like yesterday or the day before, I feel like I found my people.
Beautiful.
And the only thing the only rule really is like, if you are judgy, I will bounce you and I won't feel bad about it. And so if you're interested in that, you can go to patreon.com/skepticpastor. Patreon.com/skepticpastor. It's $3 a month, because we will not tell you to give us 10% of your income, because that's bullshit and also not in the Bible. But like, it's pay for what you get. If it works, great. If it doesn't work, just stop paying. It'll be okay. And you've only wasted $3.
Yeah.
And so I would just say, there are communities out there, but for you, being in that place as a deacon, whatever, a therapist, they long for the community of the church. What do you say?
Yeah, this is a big one that so many people talk about. And well, first of all, I have a book group around Hillary McBride's book, Holy Hurt. That's for therapists coming up. That's starting in July. So you can send me a message on my Instagram for more information on
and
that.
And that Instagram is?
Willow Tree Wisdom and Psych.
Okay.
That's on Instagram. And yeah, community is a big one for people, and a lot of times it takes like a therapy group or a group like yours, Jeremy, where like you can heal a little bit and find some safety. And also I would suggest, like, start something yourself. What do you want? Do you want to read a book with a group of people? Can you advertise it at your yoga studio, or invite a couple neighbors to do something? Like, those of us who are in the church, we're actually really good at community.
Yeah.
And so I would say, like, put on your brave pants and see if you can start something.
Yeah, that's great. Well, Laurie, thank you so much.
It's been lovely.
And everybody, this will be a podcast on the Unbelief Podcast, so if you missed part of it, if you'd like to hear us talk about what religious trauma is, any of that, and it'll be like not this Wednesday coming up, but the next Wednesday, it'll be a podcast episode, and you can find Laurie on Instagram at Willowtree Wisdom and Psych. Is it A-N-D or ampersand?
A-N-D.
A-N-D Psych. Yeah, thank you so much.
Thank you.